Hello again, this is Philip Rowles for Dr. Ding's Global Issues course, and for my second podcast presentation, I decided to talk about labor laws and international labor laws. So starting out just about labor laws in general, the International Labor Organization, or ILO, as I will be referring to it from now on, they really go in depth about labor. That is kind of what they're all about. And one of the things that they are quoted as saying on their website is the adoption of labor laws and regulations is an important means of implementing ILO standards, promoting the ILO declaration and the fundamental principles and rights at work, and putting the concept of decent work into practice. So that's just making sure that all workers have the same fair opportunities and resources at their workplace and are also in fair working conditions, getting compensated fairly, because unlike the US, there are a lot of places that do not receive that fair treatment. And a lot of their working conditions are much, much poorer than those here. So some of the major international labor that's been in the news, agricultural jobs are among the most hazardous, unprotected, and poorly paid. Even though the US is a big agriculture industry, we have revolutionized it, whereas there are still many places where agriculture is very hard work, it's very labor intensive, and it is very risky work because they are underdeveloped and they do not have these skill sets or tools to help properly ensure safety in those working areas. One of the things I found here, the ILO outlined a specific case in Belgium. They launched the Coalition on Decent Work for Equitable Food Systems. And now that was to ensure that fair standards are implemented for agricultural workers. I myself live in a very rural area and know a lot of farms and farmers, and they have very safe practices in place because we are in a more advanced society. But in places like Belgium and even those in Africa, those lower level underdeveloped areas or those that are still developing, they are still working to make sure that they have those resources, and they are still trying to garner resources to make sure that people who are working in those industries are going to be safe. Some more news that there was, I'll move myself over here real quick. In late October, there was a big push for there to be more gender equality in Africa. There are still places where gender equality in the workplace is a big thing. According to an estimate by the African Development Bank in 2019, the Africa Gender Index averaged 48.62% on the continent, and that low score indicates the urgent nature of considering gender equality as a fundamental issue in developing initiatives. And again, kind of going further here, ILO News is in a news article they had. Women are facing serious systematic problems in international trade agreements, and the informal economy accounts for 80% of employment in most African countries, and that's a sector in which a majority of the women work. And a lot of those women do not have proper training, have limited access to resources, and in the decision-making process, and are often employed in jobs with precarious working conditions. So there's really a lot of things internationally that, there's unfair labor practices, but then when you break it down even further, the gender gap is even bigger, and that causes even more issues to arise in the case of Africa, where women lack the training, they have limited access to resources and things in financing, information, time, and negotiations, because there is still that big gap between, men in power and women having the power to do things. So there needs to be a bigger push for there to be more gender equality, making sure that those gaps are being closed, even if it takes some time, working to make sure that, again, everyone has that fair access to all the resources to ensure that we are all working in good conditions, we're working safely, and that the world is working together to become a better place. There have been other recent changes in times. One of these things, among other requirements, the amended law requires employers to take specific measures to prevent and curb sexual harassment against women and prohibits gender discrimination during the recruitment process. Now, this is a big thing, I believe this was in Australia. Gender discrimination, sexual harassment, that has been something in workplaces that has been a problem. It has been a problem for decades, centuries, and it has been a big push as of recent years, which is a good thing, to try and eliminate that. And to go further in that quote, employers are expressly prohibited from inquiring into or investigating the marital status or childbearing situation of female applicants. Now, that is really good to hear, because a lot of employers have a preconceived notion that, if someone is married, they're going to have commitments outside of that. If they're going to be in a childbearing situation, they might be pregnant when they're applying or in their interview process. They will have a preconceived notion, this person will work for maybe 3, 4, 5 months, depending on how far along, and then they're going to disappear. So they will have that preconceived notion, why should we hire them if they're going to be leaving anyways? And one of the other ones here, the objective of the Fair Work Act has been amended to achieve gender equality in the workplace by ensuring equal remuneration for work of equal value, regardless of gender. A test case in the aged care sector has already seen a 15% pay increase awarded to certain employees in the sector. Now, that is another great thing, is that there is still that work, and there's other countries that are implementing these pay increases to award certain employees in sectors more money, trying to make sure there's fair wages. Because even in the US, there are still gender pay gaps, and making sure that we are closing those and making sure everyone has that fair pay is a great thing. Now, labor laws are very complex. Roads to unification of labor laws are, it's a bumpy road. There's a lot of twists and turns. One of the things from Chipette's HRCI was the website. Local regulations will differ no matter where you are in the world, but international compliance can follow a blueprint of interstate compliance. So local regulations are really going to throw the wrench in things. And there's also data privacy issues. That is another big thing from the EU's General Data Protection Regulation. Data is the primary commodity of the new economy, and global companies will be transferring it across national borders. So that's another thing where a lot of countries are scared of this unification, because there are so many issues with privacy scares. Now, change to come, there is still a lot of progress made to reach fair labor laws. International conflicts, privacy issues, regulation. Here in the US, we had major union things happen. We had the SAG-AFTRA strike with the Actors and the Writers Guild. We just had all the auto workers, their strikes are finally over. So there's a lot of things that can throw wrenches in the fight for fair labor. And we can work and try to make labor laws and standards for all, but it was going to take a very long time, and especially the cooperation from everyone across the globe.